He wasn't supposed to be there, not in the headlines, not in the semifinals, and definitely not standing on court Philippe Chatrier, staring across a French Open final. The world had just met Martin Verkerk, a man ranked outside the sport's elite who'd made barely $300,000 in his entire career, and in 2 weeks earned nearly twice that, served 124 aces on clay, and toppled champions like Moya and Coria. Then, just as suddenly as he arrived, he was gone. No farewell, no scandal, just silence. This is the story of Martin Verkerk, the man who lived a dream for 2 weeks, and the quiet years that followed when the dream was gone. Before Paris 2003, Martin Verkerk was the kind of player tennis barely notices. A big serving Dutchman with a temper that sometimes ran hotter than his ranking, living week to week on the ATP's undercard. But he hadn't always been anonymous. As a teenager, Verkerk trained with the best players in the Netherlands, likes of Richard Krajicek and Sjeng Schalken, and even won the national under-18 title. In the Dutch system, that meant he was one of the chosen few, the kids who got to hit on the same courts as champions. And yet, once he turned professional, that promise began to blur into routine. The early 2000s were a grind of hotel rooms, qualifying draws, and lost Mondays. By the time the 2003 clay season began, Verkerk had featured in 4 Grand Slam competitions and hadn't won a main round match. He'd fallen to Andy Roddick at the 2002 US Open, Mark Philippoussis at the 2003 Australian Open, and had failed to qualify twice before that, at the 2002 Australian and French Opens. No wins, no momentum, no reason to think Roland Garros 2003 would be different. His ranking hovered just outside the top 50, the purgatory zone between relevance and obscurity. His lifetime prize money sat at less than $400,000, roughly what the sport's elite might earn in appearance fees for a single week. That figure would soon matter, because in 2 weeks' time he'd more than double it. The French Open finalist's check, which was about €400,000 or $490,000, was larger than everything he'd made in 6 years as a professional. He wasn't riding momentum, hype, or expectation. There were no cameras tracking his practices, no brands calling his agent, no journalists learning how to pronounce his name. He was just another player trying to survive the tour, a tall man with a thunderous serve, a streak of unpredictability, and a single-handed backhand that caught the odd attention. Clay was supposed to neutralize that power. Instead, it became the surface where, for 2 weeks in Paris, Martin Verkerk played like someone the tennis world had never met before. When the 2003 French Open began, Martin Verkerk was ranked number 46 in the world. While much improved, having reached the quarterfinals in Rome just a couple of weeks before that, he was still unseeded, unheralded, and entering a surface that was supposed to bury his power under red clay. His campaign began quietly against Željko Krajan of Croatia in round 1. No fuss, no cameras, an easy win on an outside court that barely made the evening wrap. Then came Luis Horna, a Peruvian grinder made for clay. Verkerk came back from 2-1 down to win, and suddenly this wasn't looking like a fluke. His serve was detonating through the Paris air, hitting speeds and angles the surface wasn't supposed to allow. Round 3 brought his first seeded opponent, Vince Spadea, the number 30 seed. Verkerk's game looked reckless but strangely efficient, and he won that in 4 sets. Before that week, he hadn't won any Grand Slam matches in his career. Now he had 3 in a row. By round 4, things got serious. His opponent was Rainer Schuttler, the number 11 seed who earlier that year had reached his maiden and what would turn out to be his only Grand Slam final at the Australian Open. Verkerk blew him away, 6-3, 6-3, 7-5. barely blinking through pressure moments, feeding off disbelief. The unseeded Dutchman was now in the quarterfinals of the French Open. Surely that would be that, given he was up against the 1998 Roland Garros champion, Carlos Moya. Moya came back from 2 sets down to have match points and still couldn't close it. Verkerk kept swinging. He fired 28 aces that day, saving 2 match points with first serves that looked like they belonged on a hard court, not clay. When he finally won 8-6 in the fifth, he just stared at the scoreboard as if it had glitched. He would finish the event with 124 aces, still the most ever hit in a single clay court tournament. Next came Guillermo Coria, the numbered 7 seed, a man most expected to reach the final easily. But Verkerk wasn't reading the script. He crushed Coria in straight sets, pounding 20 aces and breaking him down with pure aggression. When the final point landed, Verkerk fell to his knees, holding his head in his large hands. Tears flowed as he got up to shake hands with his opponent. A player who had never won a Grand Slam match before Roland Garros was now 1 win away from lifting the trophy. In the final, he met Juan Carlos Ferrero, polished, elegant, and utterly composed. Ferrero did what champions do, handled the storm and closed the story in straight sets. But by then, the outcome almost didn't matter. In 2 weeks, Martin Verkerk had beaten 4 seeded players, saved match points against a Grand Slam champion, set an ace record on clay, and turned anonymity into folklore. 2 weeks that made him a national hero. Also, the 2 weeks that would define and haunt everything that came after. Success didn't vanish overnight. For a while, it looked like the dream might keep going. Just 3 months before Roland Garros, Martin Verkerk had won his first ATP title in Milan, beating former world number 1 Yevgeny Kafelnikov on indoor hard courts. It was the kind of result that barely made headlines outside the Netherlands, but inside his circle, it proved that the big serve and fearless hitting could work anywhere. After his run to the French Open final, he rose to 15th in the world and kept pushing. In 2004, he reached the Munich final on clay, then captured another title at Amersfoort, defeating Fernando Gonzalez in 3 sets. On paper, everything still looked fine, even after that French Open run. An ATP title, another runner-up plate, and a spot among the world's top 20. But beneath it, something was beginning to fray. The shoulder, the one that had fired 124 aces in Paris, started to ache late that season. At first, it was just tightness, then inflammation, then injections. By 2004, he was skipping tournaments, and by the end of the year, he was undergoing the first of 2 shoulder surgeries. He missed the entire 2005 and tried to come back in 2006. It lasted weeks. "I think I was depressed," he told a Dutch reporter years later, possibly due to his injury issues. Every attempt to restart felt heavier. Sleepless nights, anxiety, pain that medicine couldn't dull. He'd look at old clips of himself in Paris and wonder who that man was. A second operation followed, another failed return. By 2007, he was playing a handful of challengers. He ended up losing all the 12 matches he appeared in. By the end of 2007, his name disappeared from the ATP rankings. The rise had taken 2 years. The fall was quicker. When he finally accepted it was over, he sounded more relieved than bitter. "It's finished. I can serve in practice, but not for hours. I've made peace with it." Tennis had given him everything he'd ever dreamed of, and then reminded him how quickly dreams fade when the body stops listening. When the lights faded, Martin Verkerk went home. Not as a hero in victory, but as a man trying to make sense of what had just happened. For years, tennis had been his only world. When that world disappeared, he didn't know how to live in the new one. In an interview with Helden magazine in 2014, he admitted how badly things spiraled after his body gave up. "At one point, I didn't speak to anyone. didn't return calls. I sat at home with the curtains closed, didn't want to get out of bed, and didn't do anything at all. I think I was depressed, yes. He became withdrawn, bitter and angry at the game and at himself. He admitted, if someone else told a story, I felt like they were whining because my problem was much bigger. Also, each time he tried to step outside, the same questions followed. When are you coming back? How's the shoulder? Will you play again? For someone already battling pain and doubt, those questions became unbearable. In that same interview, he said he wished he'd quit in 2005 itself, sparing himself the 3 more years of pain that followed. It might have allowed him to begin coaching sooner, the role that eventually gave him peace. His biography by Martin Vriesema offered another layer, a portrait of a player who lived fast and played faster. The book describes how alcohol and women were part of his rhythm, not a distraction, but, in a strange way, a release that helped him play free at Roland Garros in 2003. But the joy that had once made him fearless slowly turned into obligation, a game of schedules and treatments. He also parted ways with his coach, Nick Carr, a mentor who had guided him during his rise. That split left him angry and rudderless, another piece of stability gone. In the years that followed, however, Verkerk slowly built something new. He started coaching, founded the Verkerk Tennis Academy, and began working with kids who knew him only as the man who'd once reached a French Open final. Over the years, when asked about those 2 weeks, his voice carried more gratitude than regret. He didn't pretend to have been perfect, just lucky enough to have touched something extraordinary once, and to have survived what came after. Martin Verkerk's name rarely appears when we talk about tennis greatness. No long list of titles, no records to defend. Just one extraordinary run that ended as quickly as it began. But that's what makes his story matter, because it shows how rare it truly is to handle success, to live with expectation and to keep doing it year after year. For Verkerk, fame came like a sudden storm. It poured hard but left before he realized what had hit him. For others, that same juggernaut never stopped. Federer, Nadal, Djokovic carried its noise for 2 decades, and somehow stayed calm within it. They didn't just win, they endured. They lived inside that spotlight every day that Verkerk once found unbearable. And even beyond them, there are players like David Ferrer, who never won a Grand Slam but fought for 15 seasons without losing belief, or Stan Wawrinka, who bloomed late and proved that greatness can come in chapters, not flashes. Verkerk's story is proof that brilliance can happen once, but greatness is doing it for a lifetime. It reminds us that the hardest part of this sport isn't reaching the top, it's staying there when everything around you wants to tear you apart. 20 years later, his legacy isn't his French Open run. It's a lesson about fragility, timing, and the human cost of dreams that come too soon. Because for 2 weeks in Paris, he showed the world what perfect looked like, and for the rest of his life, he's shown what it takes to live after that perfection ends.